Hey everybody, it's Austin here. Just wanted to give you a heads up and a content warning for discussion of sexual violence. We get into the Antonio Brown story today from about minute, 1 hour and 52 minutes through 2 hours and 7 minutes, and kind of the final big topic of the week. So just so you know that is coming up, we signal that we're about to go into that conversation. So you'll have another heads up then. And that time might be a little bit different based on how long the ad runs. And I can't know how long the ad runs because of programmatic ads. So again, that is from 1:52 to 2:07. All right. Thanks.
Oh, hello. You found Waypoints, where the Waypoint staff and friends take a break to nerd out and deep dive on the culture, art, and entertainment, and increasingly sports that have been inspiring and provoking us lately.
That's cool.
In the second half of the show, we've got an impromptu football segment that we recorded after Monday's pod and decided to turn into the last block of this week's Waypoints. Up front, there's a content warning on that segment because we talk a bit about the sexual assault allegation against Antonio Brown. I think we may refresh that warning before we hit that segment. You may hear something from Austin between those blocks, but be advised that the NFL segment does go in some more serious territory. But first, we're going to keep it light here. We're going to talk about serial killers. We've been into other things this week.
BTK.
Austin suggested jokingly that we should talk about Mindhunter. And it turns out that just about all of us have checked that series out.
It's true.
I just walked Denis Villeneuve's 2016 science fiction film, Arrival. But first, gathered around the table this week, we've got Danielle Riendo.
Hi, hello.
Austin Walker.
That's me. I'm here. I'm here.
And Kato's watching the signal. So, Austin, let's just dive into Mindhunter.
Okay,
real
let's
quick.
do it. Yeah,
I had missed that you gotten into this.
I binged it. I went home. I was off for a couple weeks there, and I went home to see some family. And I arrived to find that my stepfather had watched all of the second season of Mindhunter without having seen the first. And he just it was just Netflix. It gets you sometimes. There's a whole other side conversation I could have about how 5 years ago my stepdad didn't know what a computer, how to use a computer, and now he's just I'm on Netflix, I'm on Amazon, blah 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 blah. It's very funny. But he was in the middle of watching it. My mom had already watched both seasons, and so had seen all of the first season when it first came out, and then had seen the second season when it came out, and then was rewatching the second season, or was rewatching the first season with my stepdad. And I was like, oh, what if I just start from season one? Because I've heard it's okay. I was curious. So it was one of those things. I was like, I have an image in my head of what this show is, and I've liked those in the past. And when I say those, what I really meant was procedurals about profilers, right? The big ones that come to mind that are there are very pulpy, very kind of mass market ones in the kind of Criminal Minds design. There are ones that take a prestige aura about them, like Hannibal.
Yes.
Hannibal is the one that especially for the first couple of seasons blends this overarching plot with the week-to-week procedural profile stuff. Really what I thought it was going to be the spin-off to Criminal Minds that had, God, who was in it? I want to say Forrest Whitaker, where he's Hannibal does a little bit of this too, where it's this guy he gets serial killers. He understands how to profile them because he walks the line. He's right up against the edge. And I was like, I bet it's bad, but I'll watch it. It has some talent attached to it. I know that David Fincher is on board and he has directed a few episodes and has a creative credit in some way.
So it looks like it may be actually even more involved than that.
It's not clear. Yeah. So the thing is he's not the showrunner, but he
might be the showrunner.
I don't
Shadow
take that away.
showrunner,
or just is it a firm production credit where it's he's there as a creative lead in a creative lead capacity?
I was looking into this a little bit because, to a degree, Mindhunter, like the question of authorship, seems completely obscured here.
Yes.
Because, like, in my notes, as I tried to pin this down, like, he is listed as an executive producer. So is Charlize Theron. The creator, Joe Penhall, has that credit. They brought in a number of screenwriters, Jennifer Haley, Aaron Levy, and Carly Ray. But then there is an interview where, at least for season 1 of Mindhunter, Fincher is there saying that, like, at a certain point, they just weren't happy with the way things were coming together. And he kind of ran the writer's room for that first season. So it could be one of those things where this is kind of a creative ship of Theseus in some ways. And it may not actually be fair to ascribe any one vision to this, because by necessity, it may be a lot of different people's contributions sort of mingling here.
That is what it
but I would say
like
early
too.
Mindhunter is definitely a Fincher thing. I mean, he directs the early episodes, sets the tone.
And I will say, coming off of seeing that the first episode, I realized, and then, even just seeing Fincher's, just seeing Fincher's name there was this moment where I was like, oh, this is not a Hannibal, this is a Zodiac. Right.
Yes.
This is not going to be, and eventually, like, this becomes the point of the work. I think is to lure the audience into the belief of profiling, the belief in profiling, the belief that we can figure this out, and then riddle it with doubt and complication. And when it's at its strongest, it is when it is doing both of those things in the same episode, making you feel like something maybe magical is happening here, that there is a way to access the interiority of others. And then cutting that apart because you're showing the political machinations that get involved. You're showing the biases that the best people at this fail to address or fail to account for. You're showing the ways in which some violence is overdetermined, has multiple causes, is not just reduced to one thing. You're showing the ways in which police just want to fucking close cases. And it is a really well-made show, and it's doing a bunch of different things. I left it pretty happy with it. I'm very curious to see where it goes from here. I guess I haven't done a great job of explaining what this show is. I don't know if someone else wants to stop me from talking. So yeah, Kato raised his hand. Like, what is this show?
What? No.
I get it is for you, Kato. It is.
No, I've.
Oh, you've seen it.
Well, the first 5 episodes.
Okay,
I'm getting.
We
there.
should probably also see where people are at it. Did
I'm
everybody
through
finish
season
it?
2.
Yeah, me too. Rob?
I'm only halfway through season 1.
Okay.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. So then there's a lot that I will talk about themes in season 2 then a little bit without giving particular beats. The premise of the show is that today we think of serial killers as a thing that exists, as a category of criminal. There was a time before that sort of categorization, that sort of label existed. And you thought of people who maybe killed a bunch of folks, but there wasn't this kind of boilerplate term. And so the show digs into the kind of time period where the FBI, which has a behavioral science department or has like a research,
Sort of starting that.
Yeah, like there is a unit, the creation of that unit, which part of the time goes around to teach very basic kind of ways of thinking about criminology and the way criminals think, quote unquote, to police across the country. And the other half of it is this one, cop who is he's not just a cop. He's an FBI dude. He's he's a teacher is what he actually was. He taught criminology, realizing that you might be able to learn something by speaking to the people who have committed crimes, and specifically killers, particularly these people who the rest of society wants to not look at all, right? And so the series is split between these people eventually investigating certain crimes and also interviewing serial killers and figuring out what it means to be a serial killer. The 3 main characters are this kind of like young rookie cop whose name I'm now forgetting because it's been a few weeks since I've seen the show. Holden, yes.
The other one's Kemper.
Holden and Tench.
Tench and is Kemper the
right?
Kemper's the
Anna Torv?
killer.
No, Kemper is the killer.
Ted.
Tench is the Holden Ford.
Though Kemper is like the third buddy. That's
Kind
the
of,
this is
right?
the weird thing about the show in season
especially.
1.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you have Holden Ford, who is the special agent who is like gung ho, who has this instinct that there's something to learn here, who knows how to get people talking. A lot of the episodes have him finding the ways to open the serial killers who he's speaking to up to sharing what their thought process was. And as a note, he's doing a lot of this at a time period where no one thought there was a thought process.
Right.
Where again and again, the show hammers home the fact that when he talks about this process to other people in the FBI and other people in police, in police departments across the country, they're grossed out by the idea that you would like. Some people are just bad, aren't they? Some people are just born bad, and that question is like at the heart of the show because of how bad these crimes are often make you want to retreat to this sort of like totalizing that's just a bad person.
Very black and white kind of thinking. Yeah. Yeah.
And then over the course of the first season, the second season, the show ends up circling around this group of 3 characters: Holden Ford, Bill Tench, who is his like partner, who is another teacher, another person who understands behavioral psychology in a way the rest of the feds don't, but is also kind of just like old school about everything.
He's Harvey Bullock.
He is Harvey Bullock, 100%.
He's got a crew cut.
The thing I love about him is he's that guy who, if you've ever been in a professional role where you see someone who was ahead of the curve 10 years ago,
yes,
but now has become like, he's just one of the guys. He's just like, he's part of the infrastructure. He's part of the system.
Yeah.
He's replicating the things that, maybe he pushed things in a positive direction, right? 5-10 years ago, Tench is the guy who got people saying maybe there's more to bad guys than they're bad guys. But he isn't quite at the point yet where he wants to talk about psychology or deal too directly with academia. The third super important character is Wendy Carr, who's played by Anna Torv, who is a lesbian, and who in season 2, her queer relationships end up being a huge focal point.
Yes.
In fact, I think season 2 is so much more about Tench and Carr than it is about Ford, which is a relief in some ways.
I think so. I think a massive relief.
Yeah.
And not to just to go off that point.
Please, no.
And I won't spoil anything, but vaguely the fact that the show pays a lot more attention to her relationships and also the emotional labor that she does
so much,
especially in the first few episodes, is, my God, I really well, of course I did. I really related to her, and also there's a lot about class in queer relationships that happens in that season that is phenomenal.
Yes.
It's not easy to watch in some cases, but it is really well done and really, really interesting to kind of see, especially, and this is like 1980, 79, 80,
it's the
81.
Late 70s, season 1, season 2 is... I want to say
80.
Well, we can know because
we can figure it out. Yeah, there's a real life thing.
There's a real life thing that was really bad. The second season deals a lot with the children. The death of. I don't even want to say the number because to some degree, the degree to which the killings go on is a question if you don't know about the real killings. Yeah. But I will say dozens of children who were killed in Atlanta over the 1979 to 1981 period is like is there a single killer there? How do you crack that? And more importantly, how was the community already working towards that end? And how are these fucking helicopter feds coming in to save the day actually intersecting with local concerns?
Extremely. Yeah.
I should say Wendy Carr, the character that is the lesbian woman, is a full-time psychologist. She is like from academia.
Yes.
She knows what the fuck she is talking about, and she is driven to do something with the science.
Yes.
And to get access to people who have done things that only someone with her expertise has the interest in talking to begin with.
And to make sense out of, or to make some kinds of connections with.
Totally.
Yeah. She's great.
I realized I've been this whole time looking for all my notes, and I realized I had them on my phone, not on my computer, because I was hanging out with my parents and didn't want to bring my computer out to write down notes while I was watching things.
Yeah.
Rob, I'm curious for you as someone who does have that Fincher love, how this strikes you as like neo-noir almost in points, if you've gotten that deep in yet. Because there are moments where it reads like neo-noir to me.
Yeah, I think season 1 at least is such a strange show. So my partner and I often run into a problem where we got really into Broadchurch for a while. But Broadchurch is a series that, first of all, they are very procedural, but like each case is its own season, and it's a really like deep dive into this one case. We've just started watching Fortitude, which is a similar kind of like murder in a really isolated small town where nothing bad ever happens. But what does it mean when suddenly the social compact is broken in the most serious and unforgivable way possible in a community that seemed impossible? We run into problems with shows like that because my partner tends to find them eventually get really stressful and intense, and that emotional pitch becomes a bit of a grind for her. Whereas for me, I tend to be a little bit more like, ooh, such compelling drama. Fascinating. But what's interesting to me is that she's actually got much more of a taste for Mindhunter, because for her, it is a brainy buddy cop movie in some ways, and it's a story about like scientific discovery, or at least scientism, scientism applied to.
Go ahead, Rob. Sorry, I did not.
Yeah, no. So no. I mean, it's just this scientism applied to resolving questions that maybe the science is not actually equipped to resolve.
That is like one of my favorite things in the show, is how messy the moments of quote unquote discovery, and especially the moments of cataloging and naming are. There are these great scenes in the first season where Holden, Tench, and Carr are in a room, and they will be trying to figure out what to call a type of killer. Is this an organized or a disorganized killer? Is this a there are some other
They pretty much have a whiteboard.
They have a whiteboard with all these different categories. And there's a scene fairly early on, I want to say, where they get to certain there's a certain exchange around what should we call this thing? What should our taxonomy be? And sometimes they'll get to a word that's the right word. Again, I can't remember what the one was for organized, the original one that they had. They're like, oh, it's this thing. And I was like, yeah, but what's that mean to a beat cop? I was like, oh, let's use organized and disorganized then. And like in this moment, these three people have settled this debate around how to categorize other people because of a rhetorical need, not because they're accessing some scientific truth. And that style of decision-making happens constantly, and it's never it is you're learning how the sausage is made in some way, or they're willing to show you the sausage making. And it turns out the sausage making is messy, and it's well-intentioned, and it is fucked up sometimes. And none of it is tested, right? Like, Wendy's big thing that she hits again and again is like the people who do these interviews don't stick to the instrument. As a through line throughout the entire show is that Holden can get these killers talking. They'll talk about their childhoods. They'll talk about what they do in the process of killing people. They'll talk about like everything around the sex acts that they perform. It's like we'll get you to open up about some gross shit. And to do it, he leaves the instrument. He leaves the prepared questions that have been approved, and that Carr, as a doctor, knows like these are the things that we need to have universalized so that we can judge these answers comparatively between different people. Yeah. And that is like a point of contention, and it does a good job of not necessarily making her seem like naggy or bitchy about
or pedantic,
which shows have done in the past with that style, right? I think it does that stuff really well.
Well, I think what I really love about this show is that, to me, like, we came straight off of Zodiac into this. Yes. Like, Zodiac had whet our appetite for this. And we were like, I was like, well, like Fincher goes back into the serial killer thing from a slightly different angle with Mindhunter. And so it was like, sold, let's dig in. And I think it becomes a fascinating companion piece, at least this first season. Maybe season 2 begins to evolve away from that. But the opening of season 1 definitely feels like it is in dialogue with Zodiac. Because Zodiac is kind of two movies. One is a sort of more dry procedural of the first phase of the case when the Zodiac killings were ongoing. And then the second half is after the case has gone cold and the Jake Gyllenhaal character is trying to now basically solve it on his own time, and he's become obsessed with it. And I've talked about it on this show before, I think. One of my favorite moments, and I think this is basically Fincher speaking through a character, is when he revisits Robert Downey's character in Zodiac, who basically burned out on the case and disgraced himself, but also had other issues that were cooking in the background all along. And for the Gyllenhaal character, this is where it all went wrong for Downey's character. This is the case that broke him. And he goes and hooks up with Downey's character at some point and starts asking him about it. And, this old reporter that Downey's playing doesn't want to talk about it. And he finally just says, this didn't mean that much in the grand scheme of things. Like, in terms of some human tragedy that unfolds in the Bay Area on a daily basis, the Zodiac killings weren't even a blip. And yet we devoted all these resources, all this energy trying to figure out what was happening here. And meanwhile, we don't even consider problems that affect far more people, right? The analogy he uses is freeway deaths. Right. Nobody cares about that, even though more people die on the freeway every day than from the entire Zodiac sequence. So we go from that into, and the rest of Mindhunter, I think, is basically him trying to impose this narrative, trying to create some version of this uncomfortable, open-ended story that happened. He's trying to impose some kind of order where he can put it down, where he can feel like he solved it somehow. And the opening of
the rest of Zodiac, you mean, is that?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
And the opening of Mindhunter is very much about this. It's the 70s, and there is this feeling, not just in the air, but also among a lot of the cops that we speak to, that the society has slipped its moorings a little bit. That there's just something different about this era than what we all grew up with. We are confronting evil that we didn't really think was possible on a really personal and intimate and psychological scale, and we can't explain it. And one of the real motivators for Ford is this idea that it's not just that he wants to understand serial killers. To a degree, the opening pitch of the show, the thing that really intrigues him, and it's what people pick up on him and spook. It is the thing that spooks them about Ford, is that he wants to solve
crime,
modern human nature. Yeah, exactly.
Have you played Pathologic? Either of you?
Sadly, no.
So Pathologic has this character called the Bachelor, who's a young doctor, and the thing he wants to solve as a doctor is death. Yeah. That's the thing he wants to figure out, and I get that from, and because of that, he has this degree of distance between him and every character that he speaks to in that game, because he's constantly looking for a solution to a problem that everyone else just has to fucking live with. Yeah. And that is Holden 100%. Every conversation that he has, he is trying to instrumentalize it. He is constantly profiling everyone in his life. There are key moments in both seasons where he slips into profiler mode instead of just being a partner or a friend or exactly. or a teacher, right? A key thing early on in that season is, one, he was a hostage negotiation teacher, but then he becomes this kind of early.
Jesus, that first scene.
I know, yeah, totally.
I know, right?
I'd only remembered it when you just mentioned this. When you mentioned the opening is a hostage negotiation gone bad. As he's a teacher, he will forget the stuff that Tench knows intuitively. Again, the kind of Harvey Bullock, work-a-day cop. Yeah. He forgets that it's hard to step into a room filled with anybody, but especially people who've convinced themselves that they are the people who determine what law and order look like, and overturn that by talking about something you heard from a serial killer, a term that that doesn't even exist yet.
Yeah.
At the time, I think he's calling them sequence killers still.
Sequence killers, yeah.
Totally. Do you have another question, Rob, or another statement?
No, I was just thinking the other part is that he doesn't know what he doesn't know. And I think in some ways what makes him compelling is he's very much sort of TED Talk brilliant in the way our period has become really familiar with, where Tench is a guy who had good ideas, and you get the sense got frustrated in the institution and just kind of gave up on trying to advance his work. Not only was he ahead of the curve, but people didn't want to know that the curve was even there. And so he was useful because he was good, but he's kind of a little bit disillusioned, but also he has a healthy regard for workaday police work. Ford has that. I've had these smart ideas. I haven't heard these smart ideas from other people. Therefore, they must be wholly original. And I am the smartest person for having them.
Yep. And
I think a lot of like the difference between this and a lot of like procedural TV, right, is it's brilliant guy detective and detective lady skeptic, I think is the genre that it's described as. In a network TV series, I think he would just be the brilliant, insightful, boy genius solving crime.
Yep.
Yeah. In this, he face plants so many times because he doesn't know what he doesn't know, and he constantly overestimates his abilities. There's this great scene where he starts kind of talking down to this group of rural cops. Yeah. And being like, let me tell you about this one case and how out in California, how all the cops fucked it up. And like, I've basically figured it out. And one of the cops in that room worked the case in California and is like, dude, I was there. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's this, and the reason he's in rural, like Kansas, I think, is because the case was so horrible. He was like, I need to get out of California and go to small town police work. But it's this great moment that like, dude, people who are doing your job, but like in Abilene, still might be really good. They still might like know things that you do not. The fact that you work at FBI headquarters doesn't necessarily mean that you're coming down from the mountain. And when he sort of holds out the certainty and then runs up against the limits of his knowledge and disappoints people, it's pretty brutal to watch.
Totally. The second season does this even more, and not only with the police. And that's part of the reasons why I think it's so strong.
I think it's, a better overall season, personally. I loved the first season. And I'll say, like, I binged both seasons. Yeah. Like, when the first one came out, I think maybe a week or two after, I just ran through it. And this second one, it was only just a couple weeks ago, but I could not stop. This was definitely just one more kind of thing, because it was just so compelling. Even the workplace drama aspects.
Totally.
The politics of the workplace.
Like the
guy who's like basically inept but really means well, but also he's a homophobe.
Also is a homophobe and was put there maybe through some nepotism. You know?
Probably did, which is extremely good. But and
the family drama also.
That's what I wanted to add in. That like I think a very valid criticism of the first season, especially, and portions of the second season, but is that these characters, to some extent, I think Tench is a little bit more grounded in a lot of ways, and that gets to be a major factor of the second season as well a little bit later on. But these characters are sort of disconnected from the human suffering that they're, their choice subject, especially things like Kemper, the buddy, the almost like buddy dynamic with Kemper and how much they joke about,
Kemper,
with other cops.
Who did ridiculously terrible, horrific. Like, as someone bad, like capital B bad. I don't care how you feel about like the cops. I feel bad about the cops. I feel bad about Ed Kemper, who did truly horrendous things to people.
Exactly. And like these characters to some extent are like fascinated by him, probably certainly disgusted on some level, but like just fascinated with their new toy. And the show did feel, I think, in the first season a bit disconnected from like, people fucking died, and it ruined a lot of lives. Like, it was really, really awful in a lot of ways. The second season does at least do something, I think, in a pretty major way, a pretty major narrative way, to make you feel as if, like, okay, these fucking families matter, and the suffering they're going through matters, and it is tied into race, it is tied into class, it is tied into a lot of other systemic things that I think that it's good that has a place.
And that Holden is not prepared for in any way, who thinks he can come in and
swoop in, save the day.
Who announces himself multiple times in the second season as the white savior coming in. Mm-hmm. I'm the good one. I'm the one who cares.
Yep.
Why? And he's a thing that happens a lot in fiction is that you have a villain who, I've said this phrase recently, diagnoses the problem and then overcorrects. Right? It's like a classic way to set up a villain. Holden is that in the sense that he correctly diagnoses so many problems with the Atlanta case, which takes up the back half of the second season, which is like the ways in which local police have been irresponsible. They've failed to actually work with the local community.
Any real police work.
The only people who know, like, were not able to put together the fact that multiple suspects knew each other, did no canvassing, did no basic investigation work. And he's right to make that analysis, but he's the one who overcorrects, who decides that he can run the show himself, who decides he can like predetermine who has killed the most of these people in ways that are infuriating, but also deeply honest, and in ways that he constantly lets down the people who are the actual ones who are suffering most directly, right?
Yeah.
I was wondering, like, in light of that, Danielle, I'm curious if you find that this is also in dialogue with kind of the true crime boom. Because the Kemper stuff is the Kemper stuff was already skirting a line that I was uncomfortable with, and I think the show wants you to be uncomfortable because they fall into this weird domestic routine. Like there's this long sequence where he's making coffee. No, Kemper's making him coffee and being like, "You want cream? You take sugar, right?" And like they're just kind of just like it's the Two Bros Twitter account.
Honestly, yes.
You know, but then like Kemper will say something that reminds you like, oh, these are like, there is a level of criminal violence and like criminally disturbed behavior that Kemper is capable of that like the mind not only recoils, but in some ways can't fathom. Yeah. And what did concern me a little in season 1 was that a lot of this felt airless. That you were like Holden, you were in this room with Kemper and he's kind of like this sort of fascinating subject. And I think that's how a lot of at least early true crime series tended to handle their subjects with, wow, what a crazy case. Let's dig in. And what gets lost in that is that like when you move out of the realm of the whodunit into true crime, you are getting into the realm of like sociology and then actual human pain and suffering. And I'm not sure season 1 is too interested in that, but did you find that like does season 2 begin to puncture some of the artificial bubbles we place around crimes and narrative fiction?
I think it does both. I think it both is actually showing at least some sensitivity towards victims, towards families, towards, folks who have actually suffered. Like, it shows much more interest in that. But it also sure does do some stunt casting with, like, showing Charles Manson. Like, there's there are absolutely that.
This season, we're going to talk to the son of Sam, Charles Manson.
Yep.
And meanwhile, in the background, BTK continues to develop.
Exactly.
Right? And, like, that is because that has been, just to be clear, the plan for the show is 5 seasons that is about the capture of BTK eventually. And so, like, BTK is already in season 1 as the character who you see during certain intros, and then continues to play that role in season 2 and theoretically will go forward, which is so funny. Do y'all know how the BTK killer was actually caught?
No.
It has nothing to do with profiling at all. It is a fluke. It is a technological trick. It is a like I don't want to. This is the thing that's fucked up. To your point, Rob, about true crime stories, is like
look.
It's like, I don't want to spoil it
because like it's history. I can Google it.
You don't
want to spoil it.
Yeah. He asks he wants to send a message to the police. He says, "Can you determine where I'm from a floppy disk?" They go, "Nah, definitely not." Yes, they absolutely can. And they did. And they got him through that, which is super interesting to me because there's a scene with the BTK killer in, I want to say towards the end of season 1 where he is like making copies or something.
Yeah. It's in season 2.
Is that season 2?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
He's making copies
at the library.
At the library.
Or the university
and
or
the
something,
Xerox machine breaks.
Yep.
And he's like freaked out about it. And it's like they are already planting the seeds that it is his technological ineptitude, not some like super brilliant, again, wunderkind profiler who cracks his psychology.
Yeah.
And that ends up being I'm so excited for them to pay that off, because the takeaway from the BTK is not, you know what? If we build the right instrument, we can finally predict crime, and like that isn't what happened.
It's like both ineptitude. It's ineptitude on both sides. Like the ineptitude of believing science and technology will fix all our problems from the cops, from the FBI, and also the guy who is frankly an idiot for not knowing fairly like.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not here to judge the BTK.
Nobody
killer
was a
for his
criminal mastermind, I suppose, is the point I'm trying to make. Neither one of these people are masterminds. They all think they are. You know?
I hate the BTK killer.
Waypoint is canceled for text shaming the BTK killer.
That may have been what just happened. Nobody's a mastermind.
Right. No one involved is a mastermind. There's no such thing as a mastermind.
Doesn't exist.
This is the bigger question for me ended up being, while I was watching and I kept writing these notes, and it was like, is this a fantasy of police competence, which is a classic thing that drives a lot of folks, even folks who hate the police, to like things that feature police, right? There are a lot of black folks who love Bad Boys, obviously, right? There are a lot of people who have suffered at the hands of law enforcement, who like cop shows, who like detective stories. That happens, and part of it is sometimes talked about as the fantasy of competent policing. Fuck, what if the cops were like this instead of like fucking harassing me on my way to fucking work? This is a version of policing I can get behind. But I don't think that's what this is. And then I thought for a little bit, this is a fantasy of police improving themselves. It's a fantasy of, here are all the ways that the police are, maybe they don't get to competence, but they are reflective. There are things moving around inside to push them into a good direction. But then throughout season 2, not only do they hit brick walls, you find again and again that the reason for quote unquote progress is politics, is lowercase p politics, is, hey, let's get someone new in charge down there who really understands the way to capitalize on what those guys down in the basement are doing with this behavioral science shit. You know what? The president just had a speech about how we could stop killers. We should move money into this department to show that we align with the president. Oh yeah, someone's cousin's getting assigned to this. That style of decision making is what aligns with progress, in the sense that whatever's new and shiny can get attention when it is connected to. So it is not a fantasy of police improving themselves either. I think it's a fantasy of transparency. It's a fantasy of, what if we knew why things happen?
Yeah,
well,
right.
except it's Holden's fantasy, though. I think that's the thing. Is what I've seen of the show is like in Zodiac, they're not actually solving the central question that animated all this is not going to be solved over the course of the show. Mm-hmm. And their ability to predict is there's going to be moments where it seems miraculous, but there's also going to be moments where it just fucking fizzles, and then they're like, well, damn, we just need to improve the theory. But what if the theory just doesn't, what if it just has no predictive use, at which point, you don't have something of much utility. But what you're saying there, Austin, reminded me of something I found super revealing and weird. Do you remember when Obama sat down to interview with David Simon?
Yes.
About The Wire.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fascinating to me watching how Obama interpreted The Wire and the way he wanted to talk about The Wire, which was... And I think this was a case of Simon maybe being a little bit starstruck and not explaining his work to the president. But Simon also sort of grants this premise in the interview that what The Wire shows is that really thorough community oriented policing and thorough investigation of crimes and mapping criminal networks can materially damage criminal organizations and improve crime rates in cities rather than focusing on low-level street busts. Mm-hmm. And Obama was like, yes, that, exactly. I love that. And I'm like, that is a very strange thing to take away from The Wire. Because The Wire is 1/3 about that. They absolutely do great police work through exactly that kind of systematic and thoroughgoing police work. But even on that team, they have cops who are constantly fucking up or going rogue. And what's the dude's name? The idiot.
Herc and Carver. Is that
the guy who became a teacher, right?
No, that's Presbeluski.
No.
Right.
But Priz too is the season one. Priz at least realizes he's a he realizes he's a bad cop.
Is an asshole.
Yep.
I think he's going to become a private cop eventually. Anyway,
he does.
Yeah. Yep. But so the thing is, even there on this elite police investigative unit, they're still bad cops and they still do disastrous things that don't help anyone, hurt the case, hurt the community. And then it's all against this backdrop of you're still just playing whack-a-mole until you begin addressing these structural factors that drive all of this. And this is the part that, like, you know, just doesn't come up quite as much in that Obama interview, where it's like, damn, you know, we just need to run more wires. We need to get more, McNulty's out there on the streets and more Freemans out there on the street and Daniels. But that's not really it. It's all of those efforts will go for naught if the city government is still corrupt and sclerotic and uninterested in addressing real problems, if marginalized communities still feel completely abandoned and invisible to their civic institutions. And this is like one of the things in The Wire, but you can look at The Wire and see this as a fantasy of, damn, like, if only we get some really good police on this case. If we get the good police to run wires, and weirdly, if only more crooks were like Stringer Bell, we could really clean these streets up.
If only more quarterbacks are like Eli Manning. Rob.
Right, and it's like, and also it's like, dude, like, Stringer Bell's just a Sackler who didn't inherit. Like, I mean, that's like the Stringers are already here. The difference is we're so class locked. There's not much mobility. But I think it's interesting in shows like this that people can look at them and still end up taking away a really like propaganda message and say, this shows that X, Y, and Z is possible in the current framework of policing
without
even though the show
change.
is
yes.
Yeah, and even though the show is like flashing lights, being like in The Wire's case, these problems go so far beyond street level crimes. And Fincher, I think, being a little more abstract in his thinking in some ways, is saying something begins to go wrong as the baby boomers take over America. Like ultimately, there's what he's addressing is this weird sense of generational decline and sort of a moral decay that happens in the United States at some point.
I don't know that it's the thing that works for me in this show so well is that it is not a moral decay. It is a moral revelation that the decay was always there. Again, season 2 is so much about this because it is about Atlanta as a boom town that is trying to keep white people in it and get white investment. It is that whole season ends up being about, and it's not just that. It is also about Tench and Tench's home life. Yeah, there's a huge central point of Tench's home life is about his relationship with his wife and his son. His son who is very quiet. His son who very clearly is being written to have the traits that the basement team putting together the behavioral psychology department are attributing to young people who can grow up to become serial killers. And it doesn't, I just want to be really clear, it does not play that for spectacle. Right. It actually plays that fairly well, very ambiguous. And ambiguous is the right word here. And I think it's the same thing also with Wendy's relationships. Yes. The tensions that were here were always there, but they were hidden so that we didn't have to confront the ambiguity and the fact that we didn't have easy answers. Black communities were always preyed upon, were always pushed to the side. They were always suffering bad policing and the effects of redlining and the effects of having poor local resources themselves and all of these things. Electing a black mayor does not solve that. And the season 2 makes that very fucking clear that alone, you don't just change a figurehead there. And it, because of all that, Mindhunter doesn't read to me, and neither does Zodiac really, that there is a moral decline so much as there is a moment of confrontation with the amoral or with the fact that oh shit, we can't keep our fucking heads in the sand anymore. And now what? Now that we know it's like this, There are people who want to put the sheet back over, their heads in a lot of cases.
in some very direct ways.
In some very direct ways. There are some people who want to put sheets over their head, but who want to throw a sheet over the problem.
And someone to go back to sleep.
And someone to go back to sleep. And someone to pull all the sheets off of everything and be like, no, motherfucker, look at all this stuff. But developing a second step from there is really hard. I was just talking about this on the Beastcast a few weeks ago, this idea of like, all right, we have given up the grand narratives. We've given up we've decided that shit's it's bullshit. The idea that some people are born wrong, the idea that some people are born to be killers or to be criminals, that they just have the criminal gene in them. That shit is caught up in a very particular, often very racist, often very queer phobic, often
classist.
Very classist. Absolutely, like poor birth. About his parents, right? That shit is incorrect.
Yes.
But because of that, because there's no one cause for the ills of the world, you start to look, or rather, because you don't want to look at causes that are systemic, and there is no kind of like individualist cause for the ills of the world, because it's not something wrong with, that person, that individual was born this way. You end up kind of scrambling for something. And this is a show of people scrambling for something. And often seeing the terror, which is like, oh no, it's rotted to the core. The whole system is fucked. I am not in the power to do that. So either you can do what Wendy does and like, I'm going to be part of a bigger project. I'm going to put a brick in the wall of building a future, or you do what Holden does and say, and I'm going to be the one who finds the magical solution.
I'm the architect
of
this wall.
Yeah,
exactly.
Exactly.
I just briefly wanted to say, without spoiling anything, that I think the Tench storyline does an amazing job with that sort of problem of evil question in, again, subtle ways without really being gross about it or anything like that. I really do think this show has become more empathetic to human beings and suffering in the second season. And this is saying I really enjoyed the first season, but I think the second season is more successful because I think it gives more of a shit about human beings and like how they are interacting with the world and how they are trying to figure things out and how they are really confronting, especially in Tench's case, a genuine sort of problem of evil, like in his face, in his home, in his own real, like the closest held beliefs that he has and in his life. And one last point I'll say about Tench that I loved, a small note about this season, is how much he understands what's going on and how to play the game, even if he's getting very tired and very sick of the game. The way he knows he has to tell the gross stories about the shoes, about the things with Kemper, the way he knows he has to tell these fucking, war stories to the cops to sell his vision, to get the money, to do the real thing is beautiful. And I think like a really interesting sort of parallel with the fifth season of The Wire of like, how do we get the resources to do what we think is right? We have to do these kind of gross things sometimes to like, I'm not, saying either way with any of these things, but like showing people who know the game, how they have to play the game to hopefully do the right thing has been fascinating.
Rob, I need you to see that shit because it's so seeing Tench fucking needed to like not lick boots but be the entertainer is so good. I'm so excited for you to get to that
stuff. We had the shoe, like he knows the punchline. He knows oh my
it's
god.
So good, Danielle. I fucking love it.
Well, the show's concerned with the presentation of genius, right? Like the creation of insight and breakthrough where maybe none really existed.
Yep.
I already loved Tench because there's a moment in season 1 where Holden just gets completely blown up by their boss, who is basically like, just go around the country, like do the fucking lectures and like stop rocking the boat. Like your research project is done. You need to stop messing around with this. And, Tench sits with it for like 5 seconds. And then like you can see him just sort of like realize like I gotta go like deal with this, and he storms into his boss's office and like just tears into him and makes the case that like there is something here. This is work worth doing, and I know the kid sucks. I know I know that like our team is a pain in the ass, but this is something that you need to put resources behind, and I'm putting a marker down. Like I will not accept any result here other than you give us some form of support. And Tench knows he's going to get screwed in that deal. And he does. Like they do get to continue doing what they were doing. They're also basically banished bureaucratically to, the office equivalent of the like radar station in Alaska is sort of where they're sent.
Yeah.
Counterpoint. This fall on Fox.
Okay.
Malcolm Bright is a gifted criminal psychologist using his twisted genius to help the NYPD solve crimes and stop killers, all while dealing with a manipulative mother, a serial killer father still looking to bond with his prodigal son, and his constantly evolving neuroses. Bright's only ally is a sister, Ainsley, a TV journalist who wishes her brother would take a break from murder and have a normal life. Unfortunately for his sister, the only way Bright feels normal is by solving cases with the help of his longtime mentor, NYPD detective Gil Arroyo. Arroyo is one of the best detectives around, and he expects no less from his team, which includes Detective J.T. Tarmel, a born and bred New Yorker who questions whether Bright is a psychopath himself. Prodigal Son, airing September 23rd.
I think you might be a psychopath yourself. I should note a very funny thing about all of this is where this all goes eventually is pop culture, right? Yeah. Holden's story. This is a fictionalized version of a thing that really happened, and it really happened to Johnny Douglas. John Douglas is the guy who would go on to be inspiration for Jack Crawford from Red Dragon, Silence of the Lambs, and Hannibal.
Gotcha.
He was the inspiration for James Gideon, who is the lead character in Criminal Minds. He is like the go-to, like, I have to write up a story of like a criminal profiler. That's him. And he sold many books about being a profiler. He has sold books about cases that he did not solve, about he's written like Inside the Mind of the BTK. Like, oh, the way this goes is commerce and culture. That is what profiling turned out to be best at, is creating like detective characters for us.
Compelling fiction.
Like Thursday night drama.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting, I really hope we get to someone wants to write a fictional book about James Holden. Yeah. That would be or not James Holden, whatever his first name is. Anyway,
that's from The Expanse.
Oh, you're right. That is from The Expanse. Different Holden. Holden
there it is, Ford.
Yes, James Holden
is he also sucks a little bit. He also sucks a little bit. It kind of is like that guy, so,
a little bit. There's an overlap.
Also, is the one who has I have an idea that surely couldn't have occurred to anybody before. Yeah. James Holden's
100%.
James Holden vision. What if the three factions of humanity just got along and worked together instead of competing for resources? And
certainly there's no political difference here, right? It's just
we just need to unite.
We just need to broadcast it all. We need to broadcast it all.
Is there another Expanse season coming?
I think it did get renewed.
Season 4 is
It's coming from Amazon.
Okay, right.
That's why I got picked up.
No, it was canceled by Sci-Fi.
And then
picked up, rather. Yeah.
Right.
And apparently, by all accounts, Bezos is personally, he's a fan of these books and liked the series. So, I don't know. I'm there's a lot of reasons to dislike Jeff Bezos, don't get me wrong. But if he blows The Expanse's 4th season budget through the roof,
I cannot do this.
He thinks James Holden's a smart guy.
He does.
He's like, that Jim Holden, he's pretty good.
Shout out to the Great Gundam Project over at the Abnormal Mapping Patreon. But they pointed out recently that Bezos recently gave a talk that was like, we should all move. Well, not we should all move to space.
Not we all.
One, we should move we should get, actually it was more like we should get people off of our beautiful planet. We should send manufacturing jobs to space. We should send people up there into these O'Neill space colonies, which were pulled from a kind of 1970s futurist manifesto of kind of, we need to clean the earth by getting rid of the trash and getting manufacturing jobs out of here. And some of us can live in beautiful space colonies, and some of us can live in manufacturing space colonies, that all of which were literally the thing that Tomino used for Mobile Suit Gundam's dystopic space future that leads to revolution and the
Good.
death of literally half of all humans. And Jeff Bezos is literally here today being like, we should build the colonies from Gundam. Those are them. We should
Right.
build those.
Oh my God.
The ones that get dropped on Earth that destroy huge chunks of the Earth. We should start building those. Love it.
Well, this is what was it? The Renoir quote about like all war movies are pro-war.
Right.
I think all cyberpunk ended up being pro-corp.
Pro-corp.
In some
turns
ways,
out.
like in terms of what
sad,
people saw, like it was like, fuck, this rules.
This fucking rules, man.
Last thing, this whole conversation has reminded me, though, man, the Shield should probably loom larger in pop culture discourse than it does because it predates. I'm pretty sure it actually predates The Wire.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Like might have started a year beforehand. And I think the rap that the Shield ended up getting was it seemed so heightened at the time that like The Wire was real. That was like real life on the streets. Which is kind of Simon's entire trajectory,
Yeah,
right?
going
Like
back to
Homicide was
Homicide.
literally
Yeah.
I think it was the
But-
same year.
Did you know, just you finish your Shield thing and I'll wrap back around.
Yeah, so the Shield's super heightened, except the thing is, in retrospect, everything the Shield said was basically proven correct. Like, the Shield centers on this elite anti-gang task force in the LAPD called the Strike Team, and all the, like, ridiculous criminal shit and capers they get up to. And at the time, it was like, okay, this is, like, taking the, cops gone bad rogue cop thing way too far, like turn it up to 11. And then like in the wake of what we learned about police in Baltimore, like fabricating massive amounts of evidence and planting guns on suspects, the fact that anti-gang task forces basically around the country, a lot of them have sort of been proven to eventually have gotten involved in organized crime in some way, shape, or form. And also the Shield has these two detectives, Dutch Boy
Oh yeah.
and Claudette Wims, who's played by the great CCH Pounder, who are sort of the Holden and Tench of the squad. And the Dutch Boy character thinks he so badly wants to be like a genius criminal profiler. And one of the interesting things about the series is he is a very good detective, but he's misled by his self-regard as often as he is, he will make intuitive leaps that nobody else possibly could. But there is an episode where he thinks he's made an intuitive leap and he gets somebody killed because he cannot see the facts in front of his face because those are boring. His insight was exciting, so he chases that, and someone ends up getting killed because of it. And like, it's just weird to me how often conversations of stuff, even to this day, it still feels a bit like, oh yeah, they're still basically covering plot beats from The Shield.
Yeah. The thing I was going to bring up, you mentioned that obviously before the Wire, David Simon did Homicide. Wrote a book called Homicide: Life on the Streets that was adopted into a weekly procedural. Also, that's not anywhere because I really wanted to show my mom and my stepdad this episode from season 1. It's like the 3rd or 4th season, which is called Three Men and Adina. Adina is the name of a character who gets killed early on in Homicide. And it is this super intense interrogation episode. And it's just not anywhere. That's not true. It's on, someone has ripped it to YouTube. And it's one of those videos that's like, the actual show is in like it's like a fake theater where inside of the theater it's showing the episode of Homicide: Life on the Streets.
Amazing.
But the quality is bad and the audio isn't good. And it is like,
Wait, the show has disappeared.
Yeah, dude, it's not anywhere. I've checked.
That's
like you could buy
wild.
DVDs, but it's not on any streaming service. And it's just one of those reminders that like, man, it sucks. It sucks that stuff that could be available just isn't.
Yeah.
I get right stuff. I want people to get paid too. I get it. Man, I really just wish a lot of the stuff that was foundational for
Absolutely.
certain subgenres of television were just more readily available. Anyway, I think those are our thoughts on Mindhunter. I don't know that we need to. I've kind of already dragged this very long. Apologies. Just imagine how much longer I would have gone if it had been literally the week I was so hyped up about this show when I first got back. But please, Rob, I do want you to finish this episode or this season, or this show rather, because I'm so excited for you to see where it goes.
Yeah.
All right, so Danielle, it's that time of year again.
It sure is. It's a spooky time of year. A creepy time.
And I know you have a
Back
tradition.
to school.
The semester has started.
So,
tuition is due.
Tuition, student loan.
Honestly,
Yeah.
That's the scariest thing in the universe. Climate change. Just kidding. Okay.
That's
So what Rob's referring to is that I once again, for like the 4th year in a row, maybe 3rd year in a row, and I've gone previous to that as well, I made a last-minute trip to Halloween Horror Nights in Orlando, Florida, which is Universal Studios. What they do, in case you're not aware of this, if you've ever been to like a theme park, like a Six Flags or something, or even just like a local haunted house where the whole object is you walk through a maze, it's dark, people in costumes jump out at you, and there's like tableaus of like spooky things like dungeons and clown houses and all kinds of things like that. What this is they turn Universal Studios in Florida into a giant sort of collection of these houses. There's 10 haunted houses, all with different themes, and a number of scare zones, which are outdoor areas where there's just sort
It's
of...
such a funny phrase.
It's really funny,
I love it.
Scare zones, yep. Where there's like people in costume running up to scare you sort of throughout the park, but in zones so that if you are really afraid of these things, you could kind of avoid it, basically. I think this is one of the strongest showings I've ever been to. I always enjoy this event. It's really, really fun. It is like those sort of corny haunted houses you might see at like in a neighborhood or wherever, but with Universal Studios budget. So it's really good lighting, really good, like theater directors are actually sort of, and production designers are making the tableaus look really cool and really awesome. Sometimes there's like flying characters on, like on ropes and things like that. Really good costumes, really good costume design. And of course, some of these are properties. There was a Stranger Things house this year. There was a Ghostbusters house. There was a House of 1,000 Corpses house. There was
Great.
and what I enjoy about
How'd they fit all those corpses in there?
there were so many.
Wow.
I mean,
1,000?
some of them weren't real corpses. They were running around at you, yelling
Those
at
are
you.
okay.
Did you just imply that some of them were real?
Yes, that is what Danielle implied. Which we're just going to move on.
Look, if you look at it a certain way through the eye of the Mindhunter,
Aren't we all just
everyone can be a corpse.
pre-corpses?
We're all pre-corpsing.
Yeah.
You know it's Halloween Horror Nights season when graveyards around Orlando start getting robbed.
Wait, there was a whole bunch of people here a little while ago. So I love it because this is basically game design. Like, it is very much like all of these are basically horror walking simulators with interactive elements. There are actors who are live. They're actually there. It's not audio animatronics or anything. There are people who are there and sort of reacting to you and knowing kind of, oh, this is like a good place where I can, like, this one looks a little more scared. I can kind of annoy them a little bit more or stay away if it's like a child or, I don't think that they're malicious at all. They're called scare actors, by the way. It's pretty fun.
Nice.
But there's just some really incredible sort of like level design that goes on in these. And so I kind of break it down as there are the big properties, which is, what's on all the t-shirts.
It's
and
like
all,
Ghostbusters.
the Stranger Things, the Ghostbusters.
Right, sure.
This year they had a Universal monsters, so Frankenstein and Dracula, like the classic monsters. So that was like a classic graveyard with a lot of lightning and cool stuff like that with a dungeon sort of scene. But a lot of the sort of big properties, the big names that have longer waits, that kind of thing, they tend to be more like highlight reels of the movie, of the thing. Like the Stranger Things house, which is very long and had several like scenes from the show and actually kind of went through all 3 seasons. Like there was a screwed up Billy and all sorts of stuff was happening in, I just finished that as well. So in terms of actually watching TV. And those are really fun and those are really cool. And they probably have more of a budget and like, they really go all out for like we have recreated this scene from
you're
this show
step
or this
into it.
movie.
You're gonna feel like you're in the moment,
in it, and the actors look like the people. There was an Us house that I thought was incredible.
What did they choose to do? Was it the car? Was
kind
it
of amazing?
Yeah.
It started out in the carnival.
Okay.
In the sort of the boardwalk.
The boardwalk
with,
area.
Like little girls who were dressed up as the
Oh,
character
wow.
and like real actual little girls who were like acting in this, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And really cool. And then they went through sort of the house, like the White family's house. And
Right.
like,
Okay.
it was actually amazing. Like it really looked like a nice condo or whatever. It was like, you know, there were several levels. You could look up. There were things going on. There were things going on in this sort of space.
So are you just kind of wandering through these spaces? Are these led? Is there a walk?
Led.
Is there a path?
There is
Okay.
like a path, and there are Universal employees. Like if you take too long, my mom has some sort of mobility issues, so she walks through a little slow.
Sure.
I'm kind of holding her hand, and we're walking through, and they're like, "Come on, come on," and I'm like, "Listen,
Yeah.
we waited for an hour and a half.
Yeah, you.
We're gonna take our goddamn time walking
exactly.
through. We're walking.
Come on,
we're
you.
not stopping.
Yeah.
But like we're walking. So that happens. But yeah, it was incredible. It was like that's a property that doesn't necessarily lend itself to like people jumping out at you. Like it's
Right.
not that kind of movie. Like it was a very in-depth, interesting.
Do they do any
movie.
soundtrack work?
Yes.
Okay.
There
Like, is there music?
Fuck the police was like on. Like
Great.
NWA
Oh, right,
was
in that-
on
in
when
that
you're walking through
sequence.
the like
Good.
it turns
Good.
on at a point. Like
Yeah,
everything's
yeah.
a little bit on like every minute there's, you know, elements of soundtrack that kind of come in. So and it's
Nice.
sort of timed that you walk through at basically the right time. It's almost like scripting. Like I think of it as game design and like scripting. But so those houses are amazing because they let you relive something that maybe you love, maybe you've seen, you enjoy it. I had to, by the way, on the Us house, just very briefly, neither of my parents had seen it. So I had to give them like a synopsis.
The rundown of
I was
what?
like, so remember Get Out? That guy who makes really smart horror movies about race and class in America made one of those kinds of movies again. And you're going to see people in red, and there's going to be bunnies, and there's going to be scissors.
Were there bunnies?
Yes.
Wow.
I don't know if they're real.
Okay.
There were things moving around. That may not have been a true actor, true
Not
animal
corpses,
actor.
though.
Not corpses.
Okay.
But there were bunnies. It went through the whole
Movie.
storyline.
Yeah,
Like it
yeah.
really went through like the plot line.
Did you
lots
go
of,
down like into
Yes.
the? Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, you go into the subaltern areas.
I want
and
to fucking. I want to see. I want someone to just. I mean, they probably are not going to release footage of it, but I
Right.
want someone to
They
do
might
a
have
walkthrough.
some promo footage. Or you
Someone
can see some
sneak
of
a
it.
GoPro in.
It's like,
Don't do
yeah.
that.
Somebody do it. You'd probably
No,
get like
do it.
Wink.
yeah, thrown out.
That's
don't,
a sound.
Don't do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was so cool. It was like amazing to see that translated into this type of thing was rad. And then so they do these really amazing productions on the like existing properties.
Right, so those are the big ones. Those are the ones that are
Yeah.
like, hey, you know what this
Big
is.
names.
We're translating this to a physical space that you can walk
Exactly.
through. What are the other ones?
The other ones are sometimes my favorite because
Okay.
they don't have nearly the budget, but they can get really creative. So there was one that was like a Yeti adventure, and I forget what it was, like Yeti something or other. But it had an entire storyline. And it's really amazing that like some of these have really cool and interesting environmental storytelling. So in the Yeti one, you kind of walk in, there's like a cabin in the Yukon. And you know something's wrong because the windows are shattered. And you kind of walk through, and then some Yetis show up. And then they show up again on like different levels. There's some from above. There's some that are right there in your face. There's some that kind of jump out at different angles. It went through like an entire environment. It was like the cabin environment, the outside, another cabin, a station. It's extremely cool. And there was one that was, I think it was called Depths of Fear, which was like basically BioShock. Like it was in a, not BioShock, but like it was in a lab under the sea, and they were, you know, they were mining, and oh no, they struck upon something they shouldn't have, and they went a little too deep. You know, it's not
and
exactly.
that thing was objectivism.
That's what it
they
was.
were mining. And,
Those evil fish.
Yep.
Found an
Think every,
entombed
you know-
and
Equals
novel.
A. What? Did you meet a Yeti? Were there Yetis in the
Yes,
Yeti one, or was it
several
that's
Yetis.
that's one of the things that I'm so curious about with these, because you've told us about these before.
Yeah.
Is that like I've done horror house. I've done like not horror houses as big as this or whatever, or haunted houses. As a kid, I was terrified of them.
Oh sure,
100%.
they're startling.
Totally. They run a chainsaw and the guy chases you, and there's no blade on the chainsaw, presumably.
Hopefully
But he's like,
When you're little, it's not clear, and the lights are strobing,
Yeah.
and like
That's
it's
true.
a loud noise,
One
and a
kid
dude
could
is menacing
disappear.
you with a chainsaw.
No one would know. No one would
know.
notice.
Oh, is that a corpse?
No
Or
one-
is that Jimmy? I don't
Who
know.
could say? So I was terrified of them. But now when I think about like, then the Yeti comes out.
Yeah.
To what? I mean, what was the creature design like? Was it scary, or was it like seeing a goofy guy in a big Yeti
That's
costume?
the thing. These really toe the line because they have actual budget, right? Like it is a guy in a rubber suit, and you know that.
Right,
There's
yeah,
no way
yes.
you don't know that.
But
as
what a
person.
suit!
But the suit is amazing. Like it really is like an 8 foot tall. Like it's a really tall person in that suit, and it has like real looking fur. It has like really creepy, grotesque facial
Right.
features.
Yeah.
It looks scary.
Okay.
You're not actually scared because it's like, yeah, I know it's a dude in his suit.
Yeah,
but
but you're having a good time. Your adrenaline's pumping.
It doesn't look like, oh, this was a bear suit a year ago and they just put a little
That was my
a little
question.
silver paint or
Yeah,
something. Like
yeah.
they actually do like make bespoke costumes and masks for all the different houses.
That stuff is rad. Like the fact that
really
they're doing
cool.
costumes. I have a proposal for one of these. I think, okay, so you have to imagine it's at a prison and you walk through and there's like, oh, yeah, fuck off. Get out of here, or whatever, the stuff, that you hear in prisons in TV. Because it's an adapted property.
Yes.
And then they lead you to a room, and then they lock the room when you're in there, and it's Ed Kemper.
It's Ed Kemper.
And he just sits there, and you talk to him for an hour, and it's the scariest thing
You
you've
gotta
ever
have
done.
him make you coffee.
Yeah, you have to.
You gotta
and-
bring a shoe.
Right,
You gotta bring the shoe.
You got to bring a shoe, and they absolutely lock you in there with him, and you're there for an hour,
They say
and
good
that's
luck.
it. They say good luck. There's the tape recorder running. You can buy the tape when you're done.
Right,
It's-
$19.99
or at least.
Yeah.
At least. $19.99 is just a tape. $30 for your tape. You can
Right.
get just the Ed Kemper parts
Yep.
for $20. You being like, so what's up with your mom?
You throw in another
God.
$10.99, you get a selfie with Ed Kemper.
Yeah.
He puts his arm around you.
Yeah, a little too tight.
$2 more, he does a hug.
He does a hug. He gets a hug. Absolutely. Thanks for visiting. Yeah. God. Fuck.
Good.
Well, I'm glad you had a good time.
It was so fun.
no,
I
the-
love this stuff. Shout outs to all the people, all the creative folks who work on these because they do an amazing job. Oh, last shout out. I promise. It'll be
Yeah.
quick. One of the scare zones was extremely creative and it was it was like a runway for like basically the doctor in BioShock who was like plastic surgery
Yes.
gone wrong. And that was like the concept of it. So they had a runway, they had a person like calling out like, "Oh, she's got the look, she's got the moves." And it was like plastic surgery had gone wrong and she was like owning it and like doing the like voguing and everything. It was like extremely fun. It was just like it was like, I don't know how this got approved. I don't know who
This
like
is not
went
part
through
of the
this,
fake BioShock
but
one.
it felt very, it even had like the BioShock like lettering over like a little tableau with a doctor who was running around and like had the
Well, we
very
finally
Art Deco
learned
thing.
what Ken Levine has been up to, everybody.
think
Folks,
that's him.
folks,
I think that's
we
him.
found him.
He's on the runway.
You're thinking,
Ladies
I
and
was saying he was
gentlemen.
there as like a creative director.
Oh,
Ladies
yeah.
and gentlemen, we got him.
You don't think he would do both?
He might.
He would put that mask on and be like, I must see.
Doctor, it's killing me.
Cohen.
Steinman.
No.
Steinman.
Dr. Steinman was the doctor at the beginning of BioShock.
Oh, the whole
Anyway,
medical bay.
BioShock.
Hooray.
That game scared me when I
Mm-hmm.
played it. Anyway,
I still like you bringing up that up. I'm like, damn, what a cool moment that was, though. Like you enter the operating bay, and it's just.
This one's
There's
too
some-
pretty.
We
This
should-
one's too ugly. Sorry, that's a
we
paraphrase.
should go back in time and find the time a year and a half ago to do a 101 on BioShock.
Oh my God, yes.
We should have done it.
Invent
It's
time travel so we can do
It is
that.
time to reevaluate and see if
We needed to invent time travel just to have time to do 101s. is
Yeah.
the
That too.
problem.
We do.
It would have been like needing to. It'd be like Interstellar, basically, where
Yeah.
we start like just stealing an hour or two a day to get like something else done, and then we're like 10 years older than everyone around us.
Yep.
And
Rob, I think
yeah.
you're just describing the last few years of our
That's
lives.
what it is.
We did do that.
Yeah.
We just stole that time from ourselves.
Yep. I have a lot more grays than I did 3 years
Oh
ago.
yeah,
I don't know.
It's been a fucking travel. It's been a journey, Danielle.
Speaking of journeys,
And space
It's time.
and time. Wow.
Wow.
Woo!
What a
Oh,
segue.
it's almost as if someone came back to set this whole scenario up,
Oh
Rob.
my God.
I got a phone call, and
Rob.
you want to explain what's yeah.
look, I see the entire circle. I see I do not see linear time. I see the entire path. So I finally got around to watching Denis Villeneuve's Arrival this weekend, which is based on a story called Story of Your Life by Ted Chiang. And I had put off watching this because it's weird. I had a feeling that there was a particular flavor of sad that I was going to have a tough time with there. Like, I have a similar feeling about Contact, for instance.
Yeah.
There is the really personal allegorical sci-fi about like personal tragedy tends to hit me on a different level than like the Murder in a Small Town.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is, because a lot of times it's sort of not the main focus in these sci-fi stories, but I think its presence as part of something else somehow makes it more affecting, rather than, you know, in a story entirely focused on sort of the ripple effects of tragedy across lives. But I finally did, you know, make the time to see that. And well, the other thing was I didn't want to watch it streaming, and I am behind on my Blu-ray queue because that's who I am.
That's who I am. Yes.
But this movie had been hyped up a lot, and I was really pleased to see how well it lived up to that hype. And I was a little bit apprehensive after Blade Runner 2049. As much as I liked that movie, I did kind of wonder, like, is Villeneuve fundamentally a showman and sort of a master of intellectual bombast?
Mm-hmm.
And I think Manohla Dargis, in her review of this film, actually made a similar comment about Villeneuve. She said these visuals can be real showstoppers. The narratives briefly shift into idle. Villeneuve's visuals are at once off-putting and unsettlingly seductive, and even if you want to look away, it can be hard to. Some of his limitations as a filmmaker are best expressed in the perfect crackling of those flames in Incendies and the pictorial balance of that shot of walled-up torture victims in Sicario. And I think that does kind of nail my apprehensions sometimes about Villeneuve as a director, is that he is such a master of imagery that sometimes does he glamorize things that maybe ought not be glamorized? Does he sort of make seductive things that maybe don't necessarily serve the plot or the themes as well as they just serve a declaration of his own technical capacity? I think in Arrival, it all ends up working, though, because I think his strengths do end up meshing with this material, because in a lot of ways the material is a little bit understated. And so I think it kind of needs Villeneuve's punching up to make it that much more arresting. But a thing that really got me, there were two moments that got me really early. The first thing to know is that this movie takes a long time to show you the actual, like, any sign of the actual aliens. Like, you spend a lot of the first act of this movie dealing with people sort of reckoning with the fact that aliens have arrived on Earth. 12 massive ships have appeared and sort of taken up residence in sparsely populated areas and haven't communicated. Nobody knows what they want. They're just complete mysteries. But we don't see any of what's happening. We only get the barest implications of geopolitical unrest around the world in the wake of this. But most of this is through the lens of Amy Adams' character just kind of going about her daily routines as everything sort of unravels. It's very Children of Men, I guess is the way I put it. And there are two things that really sort of caught me off guard here. One is the obligatory speaker shout out. There's a moment early on where she's a teacher at a university, and like the evacuation siren sounds, and they're just sending everyone home for the day. As this crisis unfolds, and she walks out into the quad, and as she steps out there, you don't see them, but you hear two military aircraft. Just like there's a sound that military jet engines make, which it sounds like almost like a fabric ripping sound, like they sound like they're tearing the sky open, and it is a really startling thing to hear firsthand, and it's sort of the first really like audiovisual like assault we experience in this video as normalcy is breached. And it's just kind of a sort of an unsettling moment. And then the next thing that really caught me off guard, just in how suggestive but restrained it is as she is being flown in this helicopter to the alien landing site in Montana, I want to say. and the aliens have basically come down in this valley behind these like walls of fog rolling off the mountains, and you see the alien vessel for the first time in this like it's recognizably Earth, but at the same time it already feels like the entire movie has shifted into an alien dimension. It is the Great Plains as alien landscape. And I think the ability that Villeneuve has to continually make the strangeness and uncanniness of this entire story like palpable ends up making it work in a lot of ways. It ends up taking what could be kind of a thought exercise about perception and how we weigh meaning and happiness in life, and ends up making it a really arresting and exciting sci-fi film. Yeah. And so I was really kind of just held wrapped by this entire thing.
Yeah, this is a movie that I a lot of folks, after it came out, all the conversations I had about this movie were about the ending. I was so frustrated by that. Not that there isn't also a conversation to be had about the way it wraps up and what it does around that stuff. But for me, it does just fit into that category of science fiction mystery of like mystery box stories. Yeah. There is a thing. What is this thing? Should we be scared of it? Can we learn to communicate with it? How does society around the thing shift and change? What are the implications if no news about it gets out? What are the implications internationally to the all of that stuff that is in stories? You mentioned Contact before, being in a similar space, or a lot of Crichton stuff. You think about what is it? The Sphere.
Sphere.
Sphere is a super focused version of that is just more of a psychological horror story in some places. Those stories are where I put this story in terms of like subgenre categorization and the way I experienced it. And it's a great one of those with a really strong lead and some incredible visual design, right? Like I think, Rob, your point to of note that like the way that the Great Plains are shot here, wherever it takes place, I don't remember exactly what the valley where this thing lands is, but the way that it contrasts that with the like hyper crowded university area at the beginning of the movie, even the very like homey apartment that she lives in, to these huge open spaces, and the way that she goes from feeling alienated to feeling comfortable in that space, uniquely comfortable in a way that no one else in the team does in some ways, is really, really cool. And it's just like good character work. It's just a well-crafted and, like you said, compelling story on top of the stuff that it capital D does in terms of questions of language and the way language shapes society and Sapir-Whorf stuff and all that shit,
I haven't seen it since it was in theaters, but I have a very, very strong recall of it using visual language, like you said, Rob, in a really intense way. I remember like stuffing popcorn in my mouth for the first, bit of the movie. And then once it starts really getting closer and closer, the apprehension of her and Jeremy Renner, I guess. Meeting, maybe the weak point of the film. Maybe the weak point. People laughed about friggin' what's her face being a scientist in a Bond movie. Well, this is a lot more ridiculous. Anyway, as she gets like closer and closer to like that moment of meeting, I remember feeling so much apprehension just watching it through that sort of visual language, that feeling of like gauziness and that feeling of like heaviness even walking through. I had to like put down my food and I was like, I need to stop eating because now I'm scared. Now I'm nervous. And it wasn't like a horror movie in any way. It was just, it had an incredible sense of dread and apprehension and excitement and tension that was, it has never left me. So.
Well, and I think the other thing that was, there's some gimmicks at the end, but I think the other thing that really struck me here is the entire story is framed as she is a woman dealing with a massive personal tragedy and going about her business despite that. Yeah. And there's something really powerful and affecting there too, in that everyone is consumed by this crisis. Everyone is consumed by, we need to solve the mystery of alien speech. And nobody can spare a thought for where she's at or how she's doing. And she doesn't even seem like she also can't do that. There are dream sequences where you can see the toll of that, but this also feels very much like a movie about how life goes on, kind of whether we want it to or not, and how no matter what, all of us are going to face enormous personal losses and tragedies in our lives, and the world will continue to move on. Things will continue to be asked of us, and we will have to function and focus on tasks and detach ourselves from that and go on with the world. And I think the other part of this movie that was really affecting for me is its exploration of that emotional terrain.
Yeah.
Of the world does not stop for you, and you will eventually have to reconcile your own grief with the joys you have and also your ability to continue going on. And I think that's that's kind of the central theme of this movie. And there's there's some tricks being played here, but I don't think that central framing is really disturbed by the reveals. No. I think the entire movie wants us to be considering in the background of all this at every moment when people are engaging with you as a friend, as a coworker. You also have this other context, and people may not know it, but you will have it, and you'll have to carry it and find a way to carry it.
And that trauma is one of those things that does happen to everyone. Right, different levels of it, sure, but it is one of those things that ultimately, that by the end of the movie, also is shown as that is a connector through the human existence. Is people going and dealing with trauma will be a constant.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I'm so curious about the director's take on Dune. As someone who has only ever approached Dune sideways. I've seen the David Lynch film. I've been arm deep in Wikipedia.
Did you ever play Dune 2000?
I played some Dune 2000.
Yeah,
yes. I recently watched the Shut Up and Sit Down review of Dune, the board game, which is a fascinating thing to watch because that board game seems dope, but also a lot. It seems like a lot. But I've never read the book. My grandfather loved the book, and it's on my list. It's on my shelf as a thing I want to actually read in the near future.
Yeah.
I'm so curious to see him attempt that type of politicking and pomp in science fiction after having done the kind of bleak, restrained storytelling here, the kind of cramped, almost, trying to think of the right word, because it isn't just excessive, the Blade Runner stuff. It's almost toyetic in certain places, where it's big, bold, super memorable set design, things that you would buy collector's items of, to something like Dune, which aesthetically has always been very iconic in its designs, where it's here is that same style of Blade Runner, big boldness, but mixed with the kind of wide shot emptiness of Arrival. So I'm curious to see how that turns out. I know some folks are skeptical. I'm curious.
So I think we will wait to see how that comes together, and I am sure at some point we will have. We will get into our complicated feelings about Dune.
Yes.
And what the Dune universe became and what you choose to focus on when you adapt Dune. And it will be interesting to see how Villeneuve approaches it.
Now I'm curious.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Or the 2000 made-for-TV movie about it. It was.
Oh, I forgot about that. I never watched that.
I had a DVD.
Wow.
I thought that was fine.
Yeah. I liked it, but I was also 16 and had never read the book. So I it's
Yeah.
been, almost 20 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you got the real problem of like, are you trying to set up a thing about the Dune universe, or are you just telling the story of Dune?
Yeah.
Because it depends. Like, I personally am of the view nobody wants to see Paul Atreides turn into a big worm. Or no, that's his son. Never mind.
That's the son.
Spoilers.
Yeah, it gets increasingly hallucinatory. And like, yes, there are points being made there, but also like a lot of what is compelling about Dune steadily falls away through that series, I would argue. And that makes it tough to stick with. So
Sure.
I'm curious what choices are made there. But either way, unreservedly recommend Arrival. I wish I had not put off so long watching it, but I'm glad I finally got around to it. So that will do it for this week's Waypoints. We're going to have the NFL post-pod segment here in a moment. Should we do the outro now?
Yeah.
And then
And if
we
you
get
don't want to
into
hear us
NFL
talk
stuff.
about NFL stuff, you don't have to. It's wild
Yeah.
because we recorded that on Monday. It's Wednesday now, and
Yeah.
it feels like we already would have another 30 stories to talk about because that is how
Yeah.
sports
Oh, Lord,
stories
yeah.
work, Yeah.
All right. And on that note, we're going to take a break.
Just put some dead soulless eyes on that
So-
crummet. You got money.
You got money right there. So you got a kicker.
Oh,
Yeah.
Do we
I
ever?
forgot. This
Oh
was
my-
happening.
52 yards, 53 yards.
I would have ended shit earlier if I
52 or
remembered this was
53.
happening.
Yeah.
Fucked up.
Congrats.
Shouldn't
Do
talked
we have a
about
quarterback is the real question.
But no, hold
talked
on,
about
hold on, hold on, hold on.
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
want to back up. Like, I was reading an interview with Eddie Pinheiro afterwards, and this was apparently confirmed by talking to some of the other players they mentioned. Like, when this was all like happened towards the end of the game, he was praying that he'd get along. Like, he's like, give me the shot. I can do it. And he like was mentioning to the other players around him, was like, just put it in my feet. Like, I will win this game for us. Like, that's apparently that was one of the early things that attracted the team to him, was like, he seems like a guy that won't, rather than crumbling under pressure, give it to me. Like, I will put the team on my back. And like, that's fun. It's just a good story. I don't know what this team is going to be like, the rest of the way. But, if he had told me a year ago, it's like, hey, you're going to solve your kicking problem. I'm like, great, the season's going to be a blast. And instead, that's like the thread I'm holding on to when our guy can't throw a ball more than 6 yards.
You can't rely.
Except in the final 2 minutes of the game.
Sure, he clutched right
clutch,
there, man.
right there. That's it.
Absolutely.
A clutch
I like-
quarterback.
The way he talked about, he's like, you do the pump fake, you go in the pocket, you come forward, it breaks down the coverage. And he did exactly that. I just wish you could do that in spots that didn't make me feel like I was actively having a heart attack. The time, like, it must be so nice to like have a quarterback where it's like, cool, they've got some time, they're going to be calm, collective, poised. Who knows what could happen? And I have the same feeling, but just in the other direction the majority of the time.
Trubisky's interesting because he points out how tough it is to be a quarterback in the NFL in some ways. Like, you realize, yes, he doesn't get the cleanest pockets in the world, but he does get time to throw. And when you see a Deshaun Watson or a Patrick Mahomes get a similar amount of time, they tend to make pretty good decisions at the end of that, like, brief. You only get like 2 1,000, and then you should probably be throwing a pass in the NFL, right? Like, that's probably when you should be launching. And that's a really compressed time frame, and really good quarterbacks somehow see a great deal of the field and like read a lot of routes, or they've read the coverage well enough to know which routes are probably going to be good bets, and then they make a good decision. I'm not sure Mitch Trubisky, and I think this is what separates like good quarterbacks from people who end up being like career backups. I'm not sure he has that vision. I'm not sure he has the capacity to see the field that way. And I sympathize. When I started playing some of this year's Madden, it started to dawn on me that even with the magic enchanted perspective on the game that Madden gives you, seeing if you got 5 receivers running routes, processing how those routes are unfolding and where the soft spot in the coverage is, is really tough, even with the God's eye view. I cannot imagine what it is like when when in the back of your mind, you're like, there's a 260-pound dude who runs like a 4.6 40, possibly at any moment could just appear out of my blind spot and obliterate me. That could just happen. And I have to put that out of mind and just make a decision here.
Yeah.
I sympathize, but I'm increasingly worried that the Bears have a quarterback who
has all the physical attributes, but
just
the
not gonna
mental
make that
stuff is just not smart enough. We constantly think of football because so much of the sport is like raw athleticism and big dudes running into big dudes, that how much of quarterback play is actually like football IQ, like the like football intelligence. The athleticism is a big part. Watching Patrick Mahomes do no look passes, or he'll be there's a pass he did in the game over the weekend where he was on the right side of the field running to the right and just kind of turned and chucked it to the left and didn't have a lot of, usually when you see a guy wing a pass, they do the drop back, they step forward, they lean into it, they're using their body, their abdomen, their arm, everything is where he's just kind of just kind of flicks it and it looks like a bullet shot out of his arm and it goes on the other side of the field. That's not possible. Nobody can do that, but he can. And
what was that game where it was first person, but you were playing football?
I don't know. There are football games that have had first person modes in them.
This was their whole. This was the pitch for this game.
Oh, I do remember this. It wasn't NFL teams. It was fake teams.
Right.
First person football
Bone Breaker or something
4.
like that. It was first.
Just get this guy on that to train for the mental stuff.
Backbreaker. Was it Backbreaker?
Backbreaker?
Let me see.
That doesn't.
No,
maybe actually.
No. That was just another.
Not going to get the NFL license with that name.
Certainly not.
Love the NFL, which cares deeply about player safety so much that Travis Kelce last night during the Eagles game walks to the Atlanta bench after a play and had to be sent back across the field to his own bench, which sounds like a guy getting disoriented after a hit and ending up with the wrong team, and cleared concussion protocol. Which, I don't know, sometimes people have, sometimes, look, we all have brain farts, but I think that takes on
sometimes your brain actually farts because it's been hit by a man and shoved to the ground.
That's the thing, where it was oh, well, he's back in the game. He passed the protocol. I'm I don't know if I believe in the protocol now.
They have gotten a lot more strict about that, and it's out of the team's hands. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean that it can't be eked around. If you compare how they've treated injuries like that relative to even just 5 years ago, they are more aggressive about keeping players out of the game. But yeah I mean, who knows?
ESPN NFL 2K4 and 2K5, I think, apparently had first-person modes.
Yeah, that sounds
bad.
familiar.
But get to your point, Kato, which is and also Rob, you don't know who's around you at all. The Eagles look bad. I didn't catch it live because I was doing the Friends of the Table post more.
Wentz does not look good. McCown looked almost arguably better.
I wonder if is he injured? Has there been any rumors?
Yeah, he got hit really hard and was favoring his ribs for the whole first half. He came out in the second half and looked better, but did not look good in what I saw.
I think I saw his passer rating in the first half was 6.5.
It might have been lower. It was 6 point something. Yeah, it was down there.
Well,
that passer rating
was one
is not
safety
golf.
Who just owned him the entire first half.
Yeah. Well, that's because our O line looked like fucking trash.
Wentz?
What?
Wentz?
Mm-hmm.
Fallout Boy.
Fallout Boy. Yeah. It's him. They got him. They got P. Wentz.
Damn.
I know. It was wild, but
so
he's going down for sure.
Fall Out Boy's from my town.
Oh.
My wife used to hang out not with Pete, but who's the singer?
The other one.
I can't remember. Whoever the singer of Fall Out Boy is, but that dude. They used to do a lot of house shows and stuff like that before they got popular. And then my wife always tells the story of they were really desperate to try and get people to show up to some of these house shows where it's not just And so they said they were throwing a kegger. I feel like I may have told the story before, but they threw a kegger. But people showed up and it was all root beer instead of beer. But they were already there for the show.
Party
and so
foul.
Wow.
people stayed. Well, hey, you get
like
people
root
in
beer.
a.
Yeah, root beer's good.
But
It's gotta be good root beer.
have y'all
though.
tried this fucking White Claw yet? I almost got some White Claw yesterday.
I
Wait,
have
what's
tried.
that?
I had
Is
tried
it
it.
good?
Wait, are you being facetious?
I'm not being facetious.
No, not you, Rob. You don't know about the White Claw craze?
He doesn't.
This is legitimately a phenomenon
Yeah.
amongst
Hard seltzer.
yeah.
Yeah,
Which we knew it was coming.
Is this just seltzer?
It's hard seltzer.
hard seltzer.
it's like a Mike's Hard Lemonade.
This isn't even the first
not
hard
lemonade.
seltzer on the market.
No, but
No,
it's
it's
the
just
one that
White Claw
crossed
just
The one
took
over.
that-
off as
Yes.
Yeah.
it took off as like a drink of the summer. It's like, oh, we're drinking White Claws.
Is it
What'd you
particularly high alcohol content?
I don't think
It's
Well,
fine.
that's
It's
like
fine.
It's like a beer.
Yeah,
It's fine.
all
Like
right.
I don't know. There's nothing special about it. It became trendy. Like
Right.
Yeah.
as someone that spent
I mean,
a lot of time
sometimes it's
near.
like you can get fucked up on a White Claw.
I would love to get fucked
Well,
up
sure.
on a White Claw is what I'm saying. If someone could make it happen.
So,
No, what I really want,
Austin,
though,
you need to come up.
Yeah.
We're getting a case of White Claw.
Hell yeah.
And we're getting a case of the
The
fucking
coffee beer?
La
The
Colombe
Colombe?
yeah.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And
Oh my
we're
God.
just gonna have a long weekend.
Yeah. It's cold. It's alcohol cold brew is what it was, right?
Yeah,
It was like cold.
alcoholic cold brew.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Now, admittedly,
Both of these could
that's
be bad.
something that you could just make at home, but
Yes.
this just comes in a convenient can.
I like cans.
Wait, how do you make that at home?
Just put Bailey's in there. What do you want to mix with your coffee?
I guess.
There's all sorts
Yeah,
of things you could
like-
add. Whiskey, like you
Yeah,
could
but
do.
this
You just keep
this is-
whiskey in your desk for
Yeah.
a
This
reason.
is fundamentally different, right?
I don't know. We haven't tried.
That's what excites me.
Yeah,
is
yeah,
like,
yeah.
Like boozy cold brew could be materially different than me just like spiking the shit out of a glass of cold coffee. Like that's
Yeah,
that
that's what I
could be a
mean.
different experience.
I definitely think
'Cause,
it
like,
is.
Any schmuck can just like, ooh, I'm a mixologist and pour Bailey's into something and be
That is
like,
the
look,
way
I'm a genius. It's
Anyone
delicious.
pouring
and-
Bailey's
Coach
into anything
McGurk
talks
style
to
of-
themselves.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I almost just threw it to the fucking end of this show again. I don't know how to close a post-pod
Drew-
segment.
Well, we
I don't know.
What'd
How
you
long
see? Hold
more?
on, hold
Is there
on.
more? What's happening?
Well, Drew Brees out for like 6 weeks.
yes, I
which,
did
like,
see this.
on a fluke play where it's just like he and Aaron Donald high fived, and it's just like it didn't like often
to be
think.
clear, it was not an actual high five.
No, but like if you were to watch the replay, I mean, he's going to try and deflect the hand, but it's not like often hand
Yeah.
injuries in football are like you punch somebody's helmet or you get crunched in on a
Yeah.
piece of like bodily equipment. This was like literally just
Hand
like
on hand.
hands colliding in midair, and they were showing during the game. He went out and he was just trying to pick up a football and couldn't pick up a football. Like that's like how much pain his finger was in. So he saw a specialist. He's going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks, which,
Damn.
I don't root for injuries. Drew Brees seems like a nice guy. He's been a really fun player to watch over the years. And like the whole story of, the Saints winning that
Orleans,
Super
yeah,
Bowl when
yeah.
they did was such a cool thing. But he does play the Bears and he will now miss that game. And I don't feel that scared about
Wow.
Teddy Bridgewater. And so
Wow,
Now-
Patrick is just like couple weeks away from bounties are fine. Really,
Yeah.
if you think about it.
no,
Rob, I think he's a couple White Claws away.
Yeah,
I would rather beat Drew Brees, but if you're saying, can we artificially lower the difficulty? It's
Yeah.
just, it is what it is. I'll
Yeah.
take the win is win. And then, hey, notorious shithead, Roethlisberger out for the season.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Bye. Sometimes
I'm
things work out
curious.
that
Like,
way.
at some point, that era's got to end. Is this the moment where you're like, this is done? Like,
They
it's
did
an
sign
elbow
him
surgery.
they did sign him to a
2
tier
year,
contract
right?
in the offseason, but he would turn 40 in between this season and next. He's a guy who's
he's-
constantly threatening to retire. He looks okay, but if you're ever going to turn the book, it's like, maybe you tank. And I've heard the quarterback class next year is like supposed to be.
Yeah,
There's
but
some
it
guy
comes
that
down
could
to
get-
Trust the process.
the problem is, does Tomlin let you tank it? Because like, are you going to use that to get him out of there? And two, does the owner, because the ownership there likes Ben, and they've sort of backed him to the hilt. So it could be one of those weird situations where like everyone knows this era needs to end.
Yeah, but
It's
Eli.
It's like Eli right now, right?
Yeah. He's on a
Yeah.
2-year, which means you could tank this year. You could pick up someone good in the draft, and you could keep Ben on for next year and have him like get his farewell season. You're training the rookie up. You're passing the torch
Or
off.
if he shits the bed, you're like, okay, cool. Like he shit the bed.
Yep.
Now here's the new guy comes in.
So speaking of tanking, I watched the Miami game this weekend. They're not a real football team. That's going to be a
I think isn't it possible that like Miami is so transparently tanking? Like there's what the Browns did, which was just they were just actively bad.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
And it was true when their current GM came in, he like stripped the team for parts in a certain degree, but they were already most of the way
Yeah,
there.
they were organically terrible.
Yes, they were organically tanking. Miami is just saying, what if we don't put a product on the field?
The Dolphins?
What if
the Dolphins.
Yeah, what if
They're
we
just
technically
bad.
put
That's
they
just-
have been.
That's just
but
always.
like well I could like if they do this where they're essentially you're getting this is the equivalent of Rob, when you were kicked out of I think you mentioned you were essentially asked to leave a fantasy league because at a certain point you just weren't putting in players when they were on their bye weeks, which was just offering a free win
Had a
to
lot of
somebody
business
else.
trips that year.
I'm
think
just
it's
saying.
fair. A little warning would have been nice.
It happens, but people get frustrated in like leagues where like I'm in one where I pay $50 up front to get in for a pot at the end, and you get one warning if you like have an empty roster slot, but otherwise like those free wins can mean a lot towards the end of the season, and so people don't tolerate. So like, will the league at some point like there's organic tanking, and then there's like any player that wants out, we'll take a draft pick, like get out of here. And I mean they've lost. I think I saw the what was it? It was like 41-0 last week, 43-0 this week. It's the largest back-to-back deficits since like early years of the league. At some point, you have to legislate because the NBA did legislate this out, right? It's like the way the NBA draft works now. This was the first year that they implemented it, right? Where if the worse you are, the higher percentage you have to get a lottery ball for the first round pick. But being the
there's a
worst
chance.
team
Yeah.
does not guarantee. Well, this is how it worked out, right? Like the New Orleans Pelicans, who were like had something like an 8% chance, like they were like the 7th worst team. They lucked into Zion right after getting rid of Anthony Davis. And so I think the NFL, if the Dolphins do this, at some point, you cannot allow teams to just like
Guarantee
have
themselves.
replacement level players or, that come in and get themselves to 0-16. You then implement like a 1-3 or 1-5 lottery system where it's like, yeah, if you're bad, you have a chance at the number 1 spot. But, it is sort of weird. Like, look what the Colts did, right? Like Peyton Manning, they saw they were going to have a bad season, luck into Andrew Luck.
Yeah.
But that seems unfair, or it doesn't seem like that's it, because then you can engineer it. And the moment you can engineer it, it's probably time for them to legislate it out.
And the thing is, like, Miami's a team that makes you nervous to watch a little bit because the thing is, one of the things that parity in the NFL is roughly supposed to do, in addition to generating a competitive product every week, is every team should theoretically have at least like one or two Pro Bowl caliber guys. There should be some strong players there, but a lot of like really good starters who are very competent at their positions, and then there's backups, and there's probably gonna be weaker parts of the lineup. But generally, you want teams to be like a decent distribution of talent. If you have a team intentionally begin shedding talent across the board, football gets really dangerous.
Yeah, that's exactly the
in
thing.
ways that it doesn't. Like NBA, the Sixers when they were at their tankiest. It can only go so far in terms of like the physical risk that you're
mostly
exposing
bruising
players
egos,
to.
right? It is not the. Yeah, I think a lot about how in MMA, in the UFC, it's like the fight ends when one fighter is no longer able to protect themselves, and you can't end an NFL match or an NFL game because you can tell that the management and the coaching is throwing the game and basically playing.
There's no slaughter rule.
Right, totally. But literally every down is a chance that someone could get hurt really bad, especially if they're being directed to play in non-optimal ways, right?
Yeah,
There was a play where Ryan Fitzpatrick was the quarterback for the Dolphins. I guess Josh Allen is going to, or not Josh Allen. whoever their backup, that guy was the first round pick from last year. Anyway, Ryan Fitzpatrick was in, threw a ball, and there was an open receiver. It was, just like a slant route, just, a couple of yards forward. The receiver ducked out of the way of the ball. Saw the ball and went, oh, cool. Whoop. It just
because there's guys getting blown up there. Like, one of the things that Wentz did the other night was he sailed past on
Aguilar, Jeffrey.
Yeah, Aguilar. He sailed past to Aguilar on the in the end zone and just hung him out to dry, and he got crushed by the safety and had to be he was taken out of the game. And that's kind of football's such a cooperative sport, and there's so much physical risk that people being less competent at their job, it's like any other job. It means other people have to work harder, but working harder in the NFL generally means taking harder hits, absorbing more punishment. And I think that's where the Miami experiment that we're seeing begins to forget fans having a bad product. I don't care. But that seems like a scary team to play for. If I'm Fitzpatrick, that is kind of a nerve-wracking team. Fitzpatrick has always been kind of your, understudy quarterback, but even he might deserve better than this team.
Or at one point, do you just have everyone collectively give up and it's just cool, we're just trying to get off the field. We're not actually interested
But you run into the Sixers problem because the dudes you end up with are marginal guys who give anything to stay in the league.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have guys who aren't really NFL caliber doing their best to stay in this.
Right,
yeah. And so that's the thing. The tanking only goes
sometimes
so far.
Literally their job is to protect other players from being hurt. And every time that we switch one of these people out for someone who is a little worse, I am literally increasing the quarterback's chance of getting hit in the head, right?
Yeah. Guys aren't supposed to come through unblocked. Right. When that happens, when you see it happen, a blown blocking assignment, the physical force of a linebacker coming through unblocked is truly staggering. And that's just supposed to be a really rare occurrence. When it becomes a regular occurrence, people are going to get hurt. The other thing, though, that was really uncomfortable to watch about that Miami game was they were playing the Patriots. And then we got to, given the conversation we had a couple weeks ago, we got to address this a little bit. You would not have guessed from watching the telecast of that game that there was anything but the usual off-field distractions around Antonio Brown, who's now playing for the Patriots. It was shocking the degree to which it seemed like the Patriots have spent the last week backing him to the hilt. The announcers didn't want to talk about it. But since we talked about in our Waypoints end of preseason show, Antonio Brown, after a really drama-filled and goofy summer that was easy to read a lot of things into, and I think we tended to try to take a sympathetic line toward Antonio Brown, as we often do with players who are easy to pigeonhole and people who run into trouble with management. At the end of all of that, right after he gets himself fired by the Raiders and gets picked up by New England, another thing emerged, which is that he has accusations of sexual assault against him by a former trainer. But today there's a Sports Illustrated story that unpacks a longer history of sexual misconduct, assaults. And what's the way to put this? If you watch NFL media, and I think, Austin, you talked about this a little bit over the weekend.
Yeah.
There are people who legit don't know that the narrative around Antonio Brown has been really radically recontextualized. And I kind of don't believe that on some level until I watched yesterday's game.
Right.
And I watch for 3 hours, two announcers just talk about what a great competitor he is. What an incredible, he's just revitalized this offense. And if he can just, stay on the field, if he can finish the season with the Patriots, they're going to have an incredible passing attack.
I got a DM over the weekend.
What they're talking around was completely
right. They didn't fill it in. I got a DM this weekend from a fan who was like, I listened to the NFL part of the Waypoints recently. After Antonio Brown went to the Patriots, all that shit was completely indefensible. And I was like, there's a much greater flaw in Antonio Brown than going to the Patriots. Have you not heard? And this person had not heard at all, because what they do is watch the games. And like, I don't expect every NFL game to go down a running list of allegations about players necessarily.
It would be here all day.
Because that is a real problem. But it is very interesting to see the ways in which that stuff is just drifts into the background. I guess we'll know more soon on how that case goes, but yeah.
I mean, the NFL said they're gonna. I think this week are interviewing the woman who's made the allegations.
And now there's other accusers and
other accusers, and like the Patriots line seemed to have been, well, if the NFL's not going to step in, we're just gonna pretend like nothing's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the split the difference the NFL took, which they could have easily they have this thing. They just sort of invented it a couple of years ago. It's called the Commissioner's Exempt List. It's where basically like a thing comes up with a player and it's messy. They can kind of just like, you're not.
And take it out of the team's hands.
Yeah. It's like, you're not banned because we don't know exactly what's going on, but until this is resolved, you're taken off and the team's not penalized or anything like that. And they chose to not do that because in every other instance in which they have done it, it's involved a criminal case in which the police are involved. In this case, it's a civil matter. And so their argument was like, oh, well, when really what they should have done was just taken them off the field for, 2 or 3 weeks. And maybe it still ends up in a place where we're like, hey, Antonio Brown is a gross bad guy, but at least, the woman's allegations get their time to be aired and investigated. And for the NFL to fuck it up probably, but at least she gets her moment to explain herself.
I think a lot about, obviously, Brett Kavanaugh's in the news again this week because of new information and allegations about some of his college behavior.
There's a book by two New York Times reporters.
Right. Yeah. And also a really bad New York Times headline. And I think a lot about this stuff, Antonio Brown taking the field and the broadcasters talking around this stuff. I think a lot about the ways in which we talk about a chilling effect when it comes to the ways in which rape and sexual assault and sexual misconduct allegations are dismissed or not given time, not given space. And this feels like an example of this, where in the same way that all throughout the Kavanaugh hearings, there was this insistence that he deserved respect. He went to such and such school. He's from a good family. He's from a nice neighborhood, and he's a judge. And so that means that when we talk about this, we need to talk about it with a certain degree of respect and integrity and et cetera, that hangs over the moments where the victims in these stories, the survivors in these stories, share their moments, because they always have to come through with this degree of guarding. And it's as if someone is afraid that if you get rid of that moment of respect from the top, that there's no way to come through at the end and be like, hey, we've looked into it and we've decided X, Y, Z, and Antonio Brown Brett Kavanaugh is still going to go through and get the nomination, as if that wouldn't have happened if we'd done away with all the respectability. And I think in a similar way, it's frustrating to see the idea that he has to be allowed to take the field. Put him on the exempt list, let this happen, and then what happens after that. But putting him on the field immediately, to me, sends a signal that, no, that allegation isn't serious enough. These allegations don't matter as much as our ability to put him on the field. That you know what? He's a professional athlete. Show him the degree of respect he deserves. Sure, we'll look into it, and when we look into it, we'll look into it and make a decision. But we're not going to stop. We're not going to stop the status
Chiefs.
quo.
The Chiefs, signed a 3-year extension with Tyreek Hill, where all the evidence is inconclusive on who broke that child's arm. Someone broke that kid's arm, and even if you can't fall on that because it was messy, he was on a recording, threatening his wife. Yeah. And it's like, oh well, police didn't resolve it, so
it is just
3-year extension.
When these crimes are about the breach of consent and about the breach of the breach of normalcy, the breach of safety, to then have that flip around and have this sort of insistence that we must not breach the norm, we must not like shake things up too bad until we know for sure, is just like it stings extra to me a little bit.
Well, especially because these are often crimes motivated by abuse of power.
Yep, 100%.
And like sadistic enjoyment of power.
Yep.
And I think when you immediately, because then you were sort of forced to play, you were sort of forcing everyone to adapt themselves and their thinking to the very structures that enabled the abuser in the first place. Yep. When we say, but first and foremost, this man is a judge. First and foremost, this man is a great athlete, a great rich athlete. You are immediately conceding something right at the start, that this is somebody for whom whatever else you may decide is entitled to this degree of presumption of goodness or worth. And we will then pass a similar judgment about the worth of that accuser. I think that is part of what is implicit in these incidents. I also do think that one of the things that makes these situations extra tricky is that we have a legal system that is notoriously incompetent at handling these types of charges. This is the entire criminal justice system, the organizations and institutions that we have, even outside the criminal justice system, universities, schools, companies, HR departments. All of these institutions and structures tend to be particularly bad at handling these situations and reaching any sort of sense of we've resolved what the truth of a situation is, and we can then somehow strike some sort of fair settlement or reconciliation that, if not ideal, can at least be identified as some form of justice. We don't have any of that. We do not expect it. We certainly don't expect it from the courts. And so we are left with these really, by definition, messy disputes that break into the public, and they're shocking because we have there's no other place for these things to be fairly and justly adjudicated. So they always turn into these stories where we have, on one hand, always allegations, and on the other hand, we always have sort of we can't reach any sort of definitive conclusion about what happened, and most of us will never truly know.
Yeah.
And we will never truly feel confident that justice was done. And I think to some extent, the thing that does make me a little bit sympathetic with the NFL's position here, or at least we're probably expecting too much from the NFL to do something here, because you know what I mean. It's like it's a bad institution too. We talk about this all the time.
This is the same way where it's like our government institutions regularly fail us to take action on things like gun control. So okay, Walmart, can we just pressure you to take guns off your shelves? Because we have now looked to corporations to their wokeness and progressiveness to make up for institutions elsewhere.
Right. We just want some sort of like crumb of something that feels like accountability or justice, and we will take it where we can get it. And I think that ends up with us looking to the NFL of all organizations to be like, damn, you have to make Antonio Brown face some consequences for this. And it does seem like in this case, some consequences are going to be hard to avoid as more accusers come forward. But at the same time, the NFL is kind of the last link in this chain in some ways, in terms of institutions that are supposed to look after people and advocate for victims, for survivors, and try to reach fair settlements. And that is just not the system we've set up, particularly around crimes like this. Last thing I will say as well, I felt strange when the story came out about the conversation we had about Antonio Brown a couple weeks ago. And I guess I'm curious. To me, I felt like the thing that was frustrating there for me was I felt like I had been reaching to find a way to create a narrative where this guy was the misunderstood, where this guy was kind of misunderstood and persecuted and kind of being treated like just a clownish celebrity in ways we often see people treated and in ways that often make me feel uncomfortable. But when this story emerged, it also occurred to me that kind of framing is that also how we end up letting malefactors get away with stuff in plain sight?
It is, but
you know what I mean?
the thing that I want to quickly make sure that we cut off is the idea that you can spot them.
Yes.
Predators put on clean faces. They access people via clean faces. They get people alone that way. They like literally hunt and prey on the back of being approachable, of being never that person. I mean, think about the fucking decades of stories about college athletes who are he's such a good guy. He comes from such a good family. Again, the Brett Kavanaugh shit is literally this. Never that guy. It's all that stuff. So to some degree, I'm with you in that I had that feeling, right? Like I actually, it was after Kato, you and I came out of seeing that Gundam movie. We also saw it with Waypoint moderator Mo, and Mo was like, "Whoa, while we were in there, this Antonio Brown story broke. The details are really bad," and I immediately was like, "Oh fuck!" Like, and so to some degree, I'm sympathetic. I feel you on this. The idea that like, are we laughing at behavior that is tied to a certain personality type that suggests a sort of narcissistic pattern of behavior that can be associated with the sorts of abusive practices that are about centering a self and centering the your desire and your thirst for power or attention or whatever over the safety and comfort of others. Like I guess you could make that case, but the thing that you have to make in conjunction with that is, and also the people who look like nice guys too. Like, and also Ben Roethlisberger, who I'm sure has many people who will tell you he's such a nice guy, right? And also Nick Robinson, right? Like that is like the thing to underscore again and again and again is like, and the soft boys too, and the church, the church deacon too. There is not a personality type or a persona that means a person is a safe person. And that fucking sucks. It's terrifying. It's bad. But it is real and it is a thing that you have to confront. Otherwise, what you risk doing is creating patterns that preemptively judge innocent people who are not, and preemptively put pressure on survivors to not come forward because, well, everyone likes this person. Everyone thinks this person is so great, they'll never believe my story. And so, like, I think the thing that we have to do is immediately say that, like, you know what? Should we be more on the lookout and be more cautious and skeptical about people who do have some of these tendencies? Probably. But also, if we also have to remember that other types of people have often just as much, if not higher, chance of being or other types of personas are also potentially abusers and predators in similar ways. So I don't know. I think it's worth. I think it was worth bringing up, though, Rob, for what it's worth.
Yeah, and to be fair, like a person who did all the same things we saw this summer from Antonio Brown could as easily not be a predator.
Right, exactly that.
It could have just been something else was going on that doesn't. There is no correlation.
100%.
There's no magic trick to profiling and unmasking people like that.
God, I watched Mindhunter over my vacation. We need to do a Waypoints about Mindhunter to talk about.
We can't do this in this conversation.
Not in this conversation.
We got to stop.
We're going to stop this conversation, but we should.
We can continue this conversation and release it on Wednesday.
No, we're done.
No.
We're done.
Nope.
Thank you for joining us on this double long Waypoints episode is what I said. Waypoint Radio.
That's what this is.
It's become Waypoints. Anyway.
I feel like this could still go up on.
It might. Yeah. Tell me how long it is after we're done. We'll figure it out. I hope everyone has a great week. I already said bye once. I'm going to eat fucking lunch.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah.
Lunch is good.
But in the meantime, our thanks to Too Mellow for the track Slide Asleep off the album After Midnight. You can find that at twomellowmakes.bandcamp.com. You can keep up with all of us at waypoint.vice.com. I'm Rob Zachney. You can find me on Twitter at Rob Zachney. Danielle, where can people find you online?
At Danielle or I.
Austin.
At Austin_Walker.
You can follow Kato on Twitter at some kind of account. A_Kato_appears.
Yes,
There you
thank
go.
you.
It's like a Pokemon thing. Kato, what do you think about this new
perfect.
Pokemon?
Those
Sir,
Oh, the I
motherfuckers.
fucked your mom
Look.
Pokemon?
What?
What?
Yeah, the
What?
I fucked your mom Pokemon. That's his real name.
I
My
missed
brain
this.
just
made it-
broke.
He fucked your mom. Look, Mike Drucker.
I mean, good for her,
Why
I
does this
guess.
Pokemon
That's-
look like it just walked out of your mom's bedroom? Mm-hmm.
That's not its real name,
You
though.
can't deny that.
That's a tweet. I thought you said that was its official name.
How
Mike
often?
Drucker doesn't have the power to name. Like it's not like Nintendo's like shit. Drucker just posted.
You
about
know, he
the-
did used to work for
This is the-
Nintendo.
You know?
I think he
There's
still
a
has,
connection.
He could call him that favor.
Oh,
Fine,
God.
just call him Daddy Pokemon.
I don't think this. I don't think
That
this
Pokemon is daddy.
No, I don't think that's
all
true.
Daddy
I
all
need to
the
see a
time.
picture of this.
Okay, I'm gonna send
I
you the
think,
photo.
Rob, when you see a picture, you're gonna know this is Daddy the Pokemon.
I can't believe.
I
this
guess
is-
the eyebrows.
Sir Daddy.
I see
That's
the
his
eyebrows.
name.
I posted it. I posted the photo. That sword is so
What?
big.
Wait,
I don't know
It's a
that I
leak.
buy that.
We all
That's
have
that's
where,
one of the Angry
where did you
Birds.
put it?
in.
That's one of the
Waypoint
Angry
chat.
Birds.
Yeah, it's a far fetch. It is one of the Angry Birds. Angry Bird
It's
is
just an Angry
that.
Bird.
I knew
That's
that's where
an
I was.
Angry
Okay,
like
it's
trying
an
to place those eyebrows.
It's an angry bird with an onion sword.
It does have.
Yeah,
that.
it's got a leak.
It's good.
No, it's in the eyes, though. Do you see where those eyes have been? Look at those eyes. Come on.
Rob, there's another tweet that we need to talk about before we go.
Oh right, I guess I have a new job.
Yeah, congratulations, director.
Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently, Remedy found out about the Crummets.
Oh,
The
no.
board found out about the Crummets.
The board.
Yeah,
Third.
the board. They're subscribed.
And
Glad to know.
like them and expect Crummets.
/ bread
And-
pancakes / bricks of cheese.
I'm so glad.
Thanks for the shout out.
So
you
I'm
can go to Remedy Games. on
I'm not
Twitter.
sure what to do with this information
Me either.
or what my new obligations are as director with the service Crummets. But I guess like Miss Faden, I will figure it out as I go.
What does the power of the Crummets give you?
I don't know.
Is it Remedy Games or Control Remedy that retweeted
Remedy
this?
Games, I
Okay,
think,
good.
was the one who responded.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
Maybe something
what,
to do
yeah.
with density?
You already have a shield. I was thinking a shield. What's the actual shield object of power and control?
Yeah, honestly, density's not a bad idea. Like the Crummet gives you the power to like collapse things into a small like micro singularity.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Or like you could combine it with the throw ability, like crush the thing to make it a deadlier bullet to deal more damage or
you
something like that.
shape it.
Yeah.
You take whatever it is you picked up, including a body.
Yeah.
And then and then you turn it into a Crummets
Yeah.
shaped object.
Oh,
This could be.
I need to play this
You
game.
should play that game, and you should have some Crummets.
Yeah, I tried the sandwich thing. It worked out well.
Good job.
Nice.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice Crummets sandwich.
can't split them. They can't be split. But a Crummet on top, a Crummet on bottom, and egg and cheese in between.
It's like a
Delicious.
object of power can't be destroyed.
Amazing.
I love this.
Speaking of delicious things, I want to eat lunch, so we
Yeah.
should go to the post pod.
Yeah. All right. Hope you've enjoyed the break, everybody. Please be sure to rate and review us on your podcast platform of choice if it allows such a thing. I think we're a 5-star podcast, but it's not for me to say. I think this one definitely has a 5-star runtime. We'll be back again with Waypoint Radio probably next week. Until then, do not give in to astonishment.
Okay, now you should, because now we're recording.
Oh, yeah. Well. So, Rob, do you want to come in like waypoints? Waypoints come in?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
All right. Should we just go on 18?
Sure. I felt good.
Oh, that was a good clap.
Yeah.
I'm airplane moded,
Are bad claps Patrick's fault?
Oh.
and they might be.
Investigative reporting.
It might be.
All right. And I'm assuming like this is going to be the lead-in segment,
Yes,
and then the
that's
NFL
exact-
stuff comes in later.
Yeah.
Yep. All right.
Exactly that, Rob. Perfect. I just realized we did not talk through it.
Yep.